What's that? What's that? Did you, oh, yeah. Did you find the Moxie, whatever for the eyes? Okay, then. Still trying to figure out this class thing, so. Can you hear me? Oh, Xander, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Can anybody hear me? I'm not hearing anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, you're hearing me, but I'm not. Somebody unmute. Xander?
I can hear you.
Ah, thank you. Okay, trying out different headphones, and unfortunately they're not as good, so. Okay. I'm gonna give it a few minutes and let everybody see if they can get signed on. Okay, sorry guys. I'm still trying to figure this system out. Okay, y'all can see this screen, right? Can't seem to figure out how to control it, but
I can see it.
okay, great. Good, okay. Hmm. Hang on a second, I'm gonna see if I can't get out of this. Hey, Jed? Okay, I think I finally got it. Hello, Joel, David. Let's see. Okay. Anybody have any problems getting work in? I think I did get quite a few quizzes. I'm not sure if I got everybody's. But if you did the quiz, I'll give you a few more minutes to get it in, but if you didn't email it to me, you need to do that right now. Anybody still have their quiz pending to email it to me? Anyone wants to just send a message, you can make the chat where you just send it just to me if you need to. So. We'll just give it a few more minutes. Also, I just wanted to say if anybody, I don't know if anybody, his parents are listening in, but for all of you guys, we may try to go to just having you, only the quizzes and the labs are going to be turned in. Everything else is going to be reviewed or looked at by your parents to be emailed back and just to note whether it's been completed. And then on the tests, they should just be able to grade those at home with the test book, solutions book, and send the grade only. We don't need the test itself. And you'll be, yeah, I got yours, Xander. As far as the, we're going to probably, for the quizzes and the labs, we are thinking of moving to Google Docs and Just those two things will be uploaded, and no other work, because otherwise it gets all jumbled up. You'd be surprised how much that is to get all that and try to sort through it all to find what we need to grade. So the rest of it doesn't have to be emailed, turned in, or at all at any time. You just have your parents mark on the email that I send them each week that says that this work was done. And don't worry about it. I don't want y'all to stress about this. I don't want y'all to, say, oh, this isn't getting done, or I can't figure this out, or anything like that. Don't worry about that. I mean, we'll have a lot of grace. We want you to learn from this whole experience, not only learning biology right now, but for many of you, maybe learning some new technology stuff that hopefully that will benefit you later on too, because you'll be most likely using this in the future as well for other classes, or if you go to college or even work. It's just things you will need to learn. So you may as well learn it now. It's kind of a crash course for a lot of you, I'm sure, but sometimes that's the best way to learn something. You just sort of forced to do it. You got to do it. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing, is using the Google Docs to upload quizzes and labs. And again, labs are all optional. So even then, and you don't have to worry about that either. But if you want to do them, I'd encourage it, because not only is it another thing to learn, but anything that you didn't get a stellar grade on, or if you missed a lab report turning in, this will replace that. And so, okay, I don't see anybody else joining. It's going to be a small class today. Oh, and that is another thing, is I haven't okayed it or cleared it yet. So I don't know if I will be able to do it, but I'm thinking of using a different platform, possibly if allowed, using a Jitsi. And so then I can do the class at the same time as the other Zoom class, because I would use Zoom. I can't use the same account. It would kick, they only can do one meeting at a time with the account they have, and free accounts only go for 40 minutes right now. So I can't use Zoom. So if we do that and we change the time, hopefully more will be able to join live, but we'll let you know. So don't worry about that until day before. We'll definitely let you know. So, okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and start so we can get done, go through in this lesson. It's pretty simple, really, lesson, just continuation of where we were last week on stems and on plants. And this section was on stem and plant classification. Let's see, I have some notes somewhere here, I'm sure. So let's see. Okay, so stems. Oh, interesting enough, there's lots of different kinds of stems. Kind of interesting that, plants, they seem like simple compared to animals, but actually they are fairly complex in of their own right. So kind of funny that nobody even has an explanation of how plants evolved, or if they did. You notice that it's never talked about in evolution terms typically, so because they have no explanation for it. So we're into Kingdom Plantae, and we're still into we're still talking about in your classification chart. We're talking about cryptogams, avascular and vascular, mostly in this section. And then we do get into some of the seeds and stuff, seed plants, seed producing plants. Okay, so the stems. We got a variety of forms. We have erect, climbing, prostatas and melons, under the ground, which that's actually something I guess I probably learned at one time, but I didn't even realize those are actually stems in a potato. And there's woody and herbaceous. So there's 3 basic functions of stem. Need to know these. Pretty simple: support and manufacture the plant's leaves. So they actually are the source where the leaves grow out of, which we know that. But they also conduct water, nutrients to and from leaves, also something you guys probably know. Something I did not realize was that they actually participate in photosynthesis as well as leaves do. Okay, my annotation is not working. Why? Okay, y'all can't see my mouse on there, can you? Does anybody? Can you see my mouse? Trying to get it to let me. I guess we won't be able to annotate. Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Okay, so first group that we're going to look at is the herbaceous stems. And those are the ones we talk about, like your grasses and, there's actually quite a variety, more than I would have thought, but anything that's not woody. So there you go. There's typically 2 kinds, dicot and monocot, and we'll talk about what dicot and monocot more is, the classifications later. But just know these differences between dicot and monocot. The chart in the book I thought was pretty good. Let me see what page. Okay, now they had a pretty good chart in the differences, but no, it's not. Okay, well, there's several. Oh, I know what it's in my notes. Differences: the arrangement of the fibrovascular bundles. The fibrovascular bundles are the bundle of the xylem and the phloem, and how they're arranged, the veins, basically. In monocots, they're scattered throughout the stem, kind of evenly, and the dicots actually are form a ring towards the outer edge. Well, not the outer edge. But they form a ring kind of in one pattern. They're just not as random. There is pith tissue in dicots only, and in well, actually, I may have said. Oh, well, I guess the fibrovascular bundles contain the xylem and the phloem, and the arrangement of how those xylem and phloem are in the fibrovascular bundles are different. Can I not find that in here? Does anybody know what page? I thought it was showed on here. Picture of that. Oh yeah, 14, figure 1412 in your book. So first you have the arrangement of the actual bundle of the xylem and the phloems in a fibrovascular bundle. And then within those fibrovascular bundles, the xylem and phloem are arranged different. They said the monocots are kind of like a monkey face, although honestly, I really did not see that. Maybe it's just me, but my imagination, I didn't really see a monkey face, but that's what it said. So a dicot, though, it's the xylem are clumped in one region and the phloem are clumped in another. So, and it's just sort of kind of obvious when you look at the diagram there showing how it's arranged. And another thing that's present in the dicots is the vascular cambium. It's not present in monocots. So you have two things that are not even present in monocots: the pith tissue and the vascular cambium. The vascular cambium can produce new xylem or phloem. And that's actually really a big deal, because that means that, well, actually it doesn't mean, that's not the big deal. The big deal about that is for that to even work, for it to be able to produce new xylem or phloem, if there's an increased demand, that the epidermis of that type of plant, of a herbaceous dicot plant, it cannot grow once it reaches a certain size. So it's not that it can't grow. The plant can't grow at a certain size because the epidermis won't, it'll crack and expose the inside of the plant to, the things on the outside, which, like bugs or whatever, and that will usually kill the stem. So in a herbaceous dicot plant, the vascular cambium only produces enough xylem phloem to a certain extent. It doesn't. It's limited, basically, how much xylem and phloem, how big they can get. And we'll see the importance of that, a difference in when we talk about the woody dicot plants. That that's the difference. So right now, just understand that there's a minimum growth that can occur in a herbaceous dicot plant because the fact that it would just crack. The epidermis isn't made to crack. It doesn't allow for the growth. So let's see. If anybody ever has a question, either unmute yourself or ask in the chat. I'll try to. Yeah, very good. Yeah, right, Joel. It limits the growth because the growth will outdo the plant. Okay, my slide is not advancing. Oh, no. Which one am I? Do you guys see this now? Do you see that pen marking? Or maybe I'm sharing the wrong screen. No, that is weird. I'm annotating on the other screen instead. Why? Oh, you can see the pen. Sorry, guys, I'm on the wrong screen, man. I mean, I was on the wrong screen. Okay, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Okay, well, good enough. We'll just use this one then, except it's not working. Go back to the mouse. There we go. Okay. Oh, I have to erase my pen markings. There we go. Okay. So on this one, you can see the fibrovascular bundles in the herbaceous stems, how they're bundled differently. Here's the monocot, all spread out. This fibrovascular bundles are in a outer, like in a ring. They go all the way around like this. And on top of that, okay, I guess this is a little monkey face. I don't think that's a very good analogy, honestly, but up here you have your xylem, you have an air space, and then you have your phloem, I believe. Let me see. Yeah, phloem, can you all see that? Pretty good. Phloem is right here. Let's see. Here's your phloem, and then these little kind of little holes there, the medium holes are the xylem, and then the air space. And then you have, actually Mark says that's xylem too, but, and then it's all bundled in this sheath, fibrovascular sheath kind of thing. Okay, and then in this, so also in this in between, you have this pith layer in the inside. You have this pith layer over here in the dicots. You don't have that in the monocot. Epidermis. So that's the main view of herbaceous and dicot monocot. Okay, so woody stems then has a couple unique features from the herbaceous. Obviously, it has layers of bark on the outside, an inner and an outer layer. The inner bark is where the phloem and the cortex tissue, in between the inner and outer layers, is what's called the cork cambium, which produces cork cells. So it's kind of interesting how they have vascular cambium produces more vascular, like xylem and phloem tissue. The cork cambium produces more cork cells, which forms the outer bark. It's real important to understand that that's what it's doing, and that's a unique feature, of course, of a woody stem. And what happens is the phloem or the cork produces as the outer bark cells die. So kind of like xylem cells die, they're still there, still functioning. Same with the cork cells as they become that hard, brittle bark, and it's actually dead cell. But this actually allows there not to be a limit on the growth, because the new xylem and phloem that are produced by the vascular cambium, as it fills up or takes up more space, then the epidermis actually splits and cracks. So, but it still provides protection because there's an inner bark. And the inner bark is close to the outside of the stem. Like it says there, the xylem is on the inner part of the stem. Actually, it's still, that's kind of a confusing statement right there. The xylem is outside of the phloem. Nope, I didn't get it right. Xylem is inside. Okay, the phloem is in the bark. The xylem is inside of the bark. It's not in the bark. That's the distinguishing characteristic of those two things. And that's real important because you'll see that in a minute, how that can affect the health of the tree. So the phloem is actually in part of the bark, the inner part of the bark, and the xylem is not, okay? And then the pith is even inside of that. So since it has pith, what does that tell you that these woody stems are? Are they dicot or monocot? Anybody? Type it, or if you want to unmute. Anybody figure out if, since it has pith, what kind is it? Which kind has pith? Which kind of stem? Monocot or dicot? Yep. I got a couple answers. I'm wondering if y'all are listening there. Okay, dicot it is. So all woody stems are dicot because they have pith. And that's one of the characteristics of dicot. So, all right, here's a diagram. We got our cork, which is bark. All that's bark. The cork cambium is on the inside of that outer bark, producing that cork. Then you have the phloem just inside of that. And as it says, it is alive. Those cells are alive. Then you have your vascular cambium that can produce more phloem and xylem. And inside of that, you would have your pith, your xylem, actually right here, and then your pith, which is the good wood that we makes your houses and furniture and all this stuff. So one important thing about understanding where the phloem is versus the xylem. Like I said, it doesn't show the xylem on here. I'm pretty sure it's this layer right here. It's not the bark. It's not in the pit. So it's right here. But they talked about this in the book about girdling and what that does to a tree. And I remember learning this when I was really, really young about how you could damage a tree if you're not careful, if you cut it or whatever. I always thought that was kind of silly, but the truth is it is deadly. And you see trees sometimes that, like, let's say somebody wrapped a wire around it to, hold up a fence or something like that, and the tree grows and grows and grows, and eventually that wire cuts into it, and they call that girdling. And eventually it will kill the tree as it cuts off this phloem. That's what happens. It cuts off the phloem so that now there's no more transportation of let's see, which one does the phloem do? Which one? Nutrients? I forget. So the food and organic materials that are the phloem transports no longer is getting to down to the rest of the plant, like the roots. So they're carrying food and organic materials. Either they're carrying food made through photosynthesis down to the rest of the plant. And so you cut it off. So the xylem is inside and protected, and it still might be getting water to the plant, so it'll stay green for a while, but eventually the whole plant will die because the phloem dies. So don't girdle a tree, I think, is the message there. So that's your main woody and herbaceous, but there's also some specialized stems. Don't really fit into either one of those groups, though I'm sure they have characteristics of those, but they're their own. And I thought these were pretty interesting because I did not know this, that an underground bulb is a stem. So it's a collection of underground leaves that sprout from an underground stem. So I'm not really sure what it means, like an onion, like what part is the underground leaf? I assume that's the part that sprouts out of the bulb, but it actually comes out of the ground. So I didn't understand that exactly, but from what I understand, the onion, well, that can't be right. Well, I was thinking the onion was the bulb. Yeah, no. Well, the book puts it that the bulbs are not roots. They are a collection of underground leaves that sprout from an underground stem. So I apologize. I don't quite get the way that they're saying on that, but if the whole thing is leaves and stem, I'm at a loss. But either way, it's not like what you would think, like a root or something like that. I don't know what else, or it's not even a tuber, which that's the other specialized stem. It's like it is actual stem that you use to store excess food. So the potato itself is really a stem, which is weird. I knew it wasn't the root, but I hadn't really given a thought to what else part of the plant it would be, but it's actually considered a stem. I guess there's other ones like that, radishes. They talk about, but there are some like carrots. Well, we'll get into that, and I won't confuse you with that. But those are actually groups. So. Okay. So in plant classification, there are basically two very basic groups. And then under that, there's a variety of other groups. So we have plants with vascular tissue are called tracheophytes, which is kind of interesting. Trachea is like a tube. trachea as a tube. So think of vascular plants as having tubes in them. They're vascular tubes, tracheophytes. And then the other classification is called bryophytes. So we talk about bryophytes, which are composed of mainly tightly packed cells. It says here that have leafy shoots and rhizoids. So you're talking about your, mosses, large group of plants. They have leafy shoots that are tiny stems with tiny leaf-like structures. And everything directly absorbs, they don't have any vascular tissue to transport. So everything is in direct contact with water and nutrients. And that's kind of really important because you think about it, that limits how big or thick or tall or anything these can get, because they have to be able to get nutrients directly from the surrounding environment and from the soil. And the rhizoids, they are not actually roots or anything. They're just strands of tissue used to anchor the moss. They don't consider them roots, just what they are, rhizoids. Okay, so the big thing about this is they have this life cycle that they label alternation or generations. And as the book said, some scientists consider all plants to have this alternation of generation. And in a way they do, it's just they're presented differently. I found it pretty confusing, actually, but we'll try to give it a shot and see how much we can try to learn from this. So you'll have this recording. So please, go back, look at this, try to understand it. Also in the book, but I had to really study this diagram to even begin to grasp what was going on, and kind of go back to the differences between mitosis and meiosis, which I'm sure you're just all dying to do that. But that's kind of key to understanding what's going on in this life cycle, plant of life cycle. So you start out with let's start out with in the moss with this phase. This phase of growth of the plant is a diploid. That means it has two of each chromosome type, two pair, they call it, two homologous chromosomes. So just like a normal adult, anything, like humans, all, any animal, any creature normally, well, I say in the animal kingdom, like the other kingdoms we studied, they have two homologous chromosomes. It means two chromosomes that code for the same traits. And that's how this one is in this state. And then it does like a normal thing. It produces a gamete that would then have only, through the process of meiosis, it produces the gametes, just like normal. It basically splits those two homologous and puts one in one gamete and another in another gamete. So it only has they're called haploid. They only have one copy of each homologous chromosome. One thing that's kind of, and then it develops into, in this one, the gametes actually develop into the mossy part that we see or we identify as moss. But the unique thing about them is that part of it is actually only contains, it's like having an egg that grew into a plant. It's very odd and different than what we study with an animal reproduction. So this haploid then actually produces, there's actually male haploid moss and female haploid moss, which just like have an egg and a sperm. Okay, just like that. Those are haploid. Eggs and sperm are haploids. And they have to join together to form a new diploid. And so that's what happens. They fertilize and then produce through mitosis another new plant, a diploid plant. So yes, all very confusing. One of the things that you just have to kind of keep in mind that this whole cycle on the top here is sort of like having a baby. Here's a little before, this is like the sperm and the eggs in this plant producing this, and then they fertilize the plant. Fertilize, it's actually self-fertilization pretty much for the most part. The egg and the sperm come together and form a zygote, which is a diploid. This part is all diploid. If you have any questions, let me know. I mean, it's not really much more to explain than that. It's just trying to go through it and get your head around what's happening in each step. So, and just thinking of it differently than, because in this one, this part of the plant is they call it the dominant part of the life cycle, because this is the what part we usually see or that we associate with the mossy plants. And that's opposite of almost everything other kind of creature there is. So amazing how unique that is and how different, but just understand that this is the dominant is the gametophyte, as it says here, the haploid. Haploid in the moss is dominant. And oh, got my other point there. Just know, okay, know that this is the how a non-vascular plant reproduces. Oh, that I know what I was gonna say. It knows, just know that's called alternation of generations. That's what they call it. That's how the life cycle is. You know, you have a question that says, what is the life cycle? It's like alternation of generations. And if they ask what the dominant is in this type of non-vascular plant, and you would say it is the gametophyte or haploid cycle, part of the cycle. Okay. And there's a picture of something, a sporophyte. Okay, this is the sporophyte generation. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have seen this, but I have never really noticed it. I don't really know if this is the same in something like a, what's that stuff you eat, you know, that people eat on their plant, on their salads. Sorry, I'm just totally going blank. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, but sprouts, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking sprouts might be in this class. I don't know if they are. Yes, thank you, Kira. Alfalfa sprout. They might be, but anyway, that's kind of what the picture reminded me of a little bit. But that's not the stage. If you think of somebody says, hey, oh, look, there's a moss plant, you don't think that's what it's going to look like. And this is just a very short-lived part of the plant, basically. And here it shows, it looks like this is the mossy part. So I guess, you know, this, and it didn't say how often or like, do they just do this once a year? I don't really know that well, the life cycle, obviously, but it's kind of curious. So, okay, so that was the mosses, the bryophytes. Well, actually, okay, bryophytes. Oh, okay, so yes, and then this is the pterophytes, or pterophytes, and the phylum is called Pterophyta. It's also a seedless vascular plant. No, it's a seedless, I apologize. This is a seedless vascular plant. So the bryophytes were the non-vascular plants. This also is a large phylum and also has alternation of generation life cycle, but it is, the dominant cycle is actually the sporophyte. So it's not the gametophyte, it's the sporophyte. So the normal way we see ferns, we think of them as what we see is the sporophyte. It doesn't look like a spore, but it looks like a plant. But it's the dominant generation. In the spores germinate into the haploid gametophyte, contains both, oh yeah, and these terms here, antheridium and the archegonium. Pretty amazing wild terms there. The antheridium release sperm, and the archegonium contain what they call the egg, and the sporophyte develops on that gametophyte. So that's kind of confusing. Hang on, let me see if it'd be easier just looking at this. So in the, again, like I said, I had to study these. There's also a picture in the book on 1416, but here's the mature form. We would consider this the dominant form. And you see it says 2N here. It is the diploid form. It is the diploid form. The dominant form is the diploid form, or they call it the sporophyte form. Either one of those would be fine to say. On this leaf, on this one, is this on one, each one of these ferns leaves, there's this little, there's a good picture of it. I'm not really sure what about the fern humor here, but this is a it's actually spelled, it's actually pronounced sori, but I think it's supposed to be sorry, and that's okay, but this is what they look like. These are actually what produces the haploids. So it's just like, how to explain, this is the process where they go through meiosis to form. Whereas here is where you get the egg and the sperm combining to form a zygote to form your haploid. This is the opposite. Let me see, let me go back and show. I wish I could show both of them together. Easier. They're both show the same, but if you remember, the process to get to a haploid or a gamete is meiosis. Meiosis causes it to end up going from a diploid to a haploid. But mitosis, the number doesn't change. Well, yeah, in mitosis, the number doesn't change. It just allows growth. But to go from a haploid to a diploid, they join. You have to have some sort of a zygote forming. So the haploid, the gametes join and form a zygote that is diploid. Haploid to diploid. Same here. So here's the haploid cycle. Your eggs and sperm, they join, form a zygote, and the zygote grows through mitosis, becomes this mature plant. Then this goes, the sorus and the sporangium go through, form a sporangium, goes through inside meiosis, forming little gametes, which are the spore. And here's your little young gametes. Then they grow and form antheridium, archegonium, and back around. So this is your haploid, this is your diploid. Just know, like, just know that in the vascular seedless plants, the dominant generation is the sporophyte diploid generation. If you know that's probably the main thing you need to know about that. Okay. Again, here's the picture of it. And this plant right here, this is the sporophyte generation. Doesn't look like a spore at all. Don't think of it as a spore. It's just that it's a diploid organism. I don't think I have a picture of the haploid generation. Let's see. This is what it shows like. I've never seen that. I'm sure, well, maybe I have. I don't know. I don't know how big those are, but this is what the haploids of the fern life cycle looks like. Okay. So now we have seed producing vascular plants. So this is a whole nother section. So we've done the seedless, non-vascular, the bryophytes, the seedless vascular, the pterophytes, and now the seed-making plants. All right, so the two best known phyla are the Coniferophyta. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that, the conifers. And then the other one is Anthophyta, which doesn't sound familiar at all. So a lot of this stuff is, I've forgotten almost all of this. So this is a little bit new to me too. So apologize if I'm not as well versed on this as I should be, but hopefully we're all learning this together. So in the phylum Coniferophyta, I'll probably have that down before, Coniferophyta. So the emphasis is on the phyta here. Those are your evergreen trees. So again, remember evergreen, what does that mean? What tissue or what layer are they missing? Does anybody remember this? This is from last week. You get bonus point, first person who types it in there. They can remember what that's called. What does it not have? Nope, it has that. There's a specific, it's not a tissue, it's a layer or cell type, or I forget how they actually labeled it. I'll give you even a hint, starts with an A. Anybody know? Evergreens do not have this, deciduous trees do. It's what actually causes them to lose leaves. Anybody remember? No guesses? Well, Joe, you guessed, so that's something. That's close, Kira. But no, that's a pigment that you see when in the fall sometimes, but Xander. Xander answered. Go ahead and do it to everyone, Xander. Can you change it to everyone, Xander, and type it again? There it is. Okay. Abscission layer. All right. Bonus points to Xander. I'm not sure how I'll figure out a way to do that, Xander. It's the abscission layer. It's a layer that chokes off the xylem and phloem, and that's why the leaves fall off, which is really cool. Anyway, that's how that works. So when you're older and your little kids ask you why the leaves fall off, and you say, well, it's because the abscission layer chokes off the xylem and phloem. Anyway, the evergreen trees don't have that layer, and meaning they keep their leaves around. They do shed, I think, but they don't. It's not because of the same process. So, and not all at once. Conifers reproduce by making cones. There's two kinds of cones on each tree, seed cones and pollen cones. So even the I thought that was interesting here. There's a picture of the pollen cones. These tiny things you see, I mean, you see them, I see them all the time, and I never really thought of that they were cones, and I just didn't give that much thought to it, I guess, but they are pollen, just like a plant, flowering plant. This is pollen, and used for reproduction. In the seed cones contain the female, the egg, and that's your typical pine cone. When the pollen enters the seed cone, the cone closes. So it's kind of interesting. You can know that a closed cone means it's fertilized, most likely, or it's not quite yet developed. I think that's actually another possibility. But because I think at a certain point, they don't open until a certain point in the beginning. So, and then after fertilization, the seed cone will open back up and release the seeds. So, and that can take a little while. It doesn't happen like right away. It can take weeks or whatever for the fertilization to take place. And it's kind of interesting because, they talk about in fires, another thing that causes fires cause cones to open. So like after a fire goes through, you have all these cones that they were closed and they were protecting the egg and sperm in there, the seed, basically new seed. And when fire goes through, it makes them open. So after, I don't know how long after, I don't know how it works exactly, but I know they talk about it a lot. That's how a lot of times it's amazing how much growth occurs after a fire comes through, because all these seeds are released. And anyway, it's interesting. Okay. So there you go. That's your seed cone and pollen cone. Okay. Now we have phylum Anthophyta. These are your flowering plants. That's kind of interesting. I didn't make the relation there, Kira, between anthocyanins and Anthophyta, because that's basically a coloring agent, I believe, or a pigment, right? Or am I getting that mixed up with another thing here? Could be. Lots of big words here. Sorry about that. Actually, those are called, anthocyanins, yeah. That is the coloring pigments, basically. And they can change, remember, by the pH. I don't know if anybody did that experiment or looked at the experiment on there with the red cabbage, but it's fascinating, and it all depended on the anthocyanins as to what the color was, and the anthocyanins and the pH of the solution. So it changes colors based just on that. So I thought that was rather fascinating. But the flowering plants, that's their Anthophyta, is the phylum. So in this one, the flowering plants have a stamen, which is produces pollen. So the conifers had a pollen cone. The flowering plants have a stamen. And then they have a carpel, which produces the eggs. So as opposed to the conifers had the seed cones. So in flowering plants, we have stamen and carpels. When they're fertilized, when the pollen fertilizes the eggs, they produce the fruit of the plant, which will eventually encase the seed. So here's where we get to where we have two classes, the monocotyledonnae. We have the monocotyledonnae and the dicotyledonnae. Obviously, mono means one and dicot means two. So just divided by how many cotyledons they have. Okay, here's where maybe this is the comparison chart I was thinking of. So this is different than, it's still monocots and dicots, but this is for the flowering plants. So some of the things are the same. Well, actually, I guess most of the thing, yeah, actually the same as what we were talking about in earlier. Um, in the monocots, you have one cotyledon, you have parallel venation, you have fibrous root systems, and then here's where we already talked about, you have the fibrovascular bundles scattered throughout the stem, the xylem and phloem arranged in a monkey face shape, no pith or vascular cambium, herbaceous stems. And then for the flowering plants, the flower petals are arranged in groups of 3 or 6. So these, so earlier we were only referring to monocots and dicots as far as the differences in the stems. I was getting confused myself there. Now I remember how this works. So these characteristics right here, oops. These characteristics right here, these 1, 2, 3, 4 are talking about the stem part of a monocot. But there's other things in a monocot that are all similar, like the one cotyledon, parallel venation. They have a fibrous root system. They have flowers arranged in groups of 3 or 6. In the dicot, you have 2 cotyledons, netted venation. Remember what venation is, right, in the leaves. So we didn't really talk about netted that much, but I'm assuming that's everything other than parallel as far as classifying as monocot or dicot. It has a taproot system, which means the main root stays the main root, basically. So as it grows, you start off with what they call a main primary root. And in some plants, the root will then split off into all kinds of small roots, multiple roots, all similar sizes. And the primary root kind of gets lost in that you don't even know which one is the primary root. Taproot, the main root remains the main root. I mean, the primary root remains the main root the entire time. It doesn't, it doesn't split up. So it's easily identifiable as the primary root. And that's what I was talking about the carrot. The carrot has a taproot system. And that's what is the taproot, the carrot, which I thought was really interesting. So it's actually a root. The other thing, of course, the dicot plants that we're talking about has the pith and vascular cambium. The dicot can be either herbaceous or woody stems. All woody stems are dicots. And flowers are arranged in groups of 4 or 5. So remember, this whole thing is talking about flowering plants. So that includes, fruit trees. So they're woody, they have woody stems, but they're flowering. And you wouldn't call them a flower. So, but don't forget, they are included in this. So if you think about that, then that means that all trees that flower are dicots. So they're never a monocot. So let's see. I think that's about. Oh yeah, I thought another thing about the vascular cambium in a woody plant that was interesting was how it makes the rings. So because the vascular cambium produces the xylem and phloem, and each year they can grow and grow and grow in a woody stem, then what makes it have rings is they grow more in the rainy seasons, warmer rainy seasons, and then in the cooler, less rainy seasons, they will they grow less and causes the different alternating light and dark colors because the xylem, when they die, they form that it's the xylem that's forming this. So that's what's growing from the vascular cambium. So when they die, that in the spring it'll have a much larger area and it'll be lighter. And then in the fall, or when there's drier times, it'll be anyway. So it gives these annual rings. So I thought that was interesting. Other than that, I think that's pretty much everything today. So did anybody have any questions about anything they needed to do, or any of the stuff they looked at this week? I know it's kind of, again, like I said, the life cycle is confusing, but try to just kind of focus on the main points of it and don't get too caught up in it. As you read in the book, that a lot of, there's argument about how even plants are classified, whether or not they're all considered to have alternation of generation of life cycles. So it's not, none of that's written in stone anyway, but just kind of understand a basic idea that that's how it's thought of, that they do go through two different phases or generations, as they put it. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have today. I am try to make sure, guys, that your parents reply to that email to let me know. That's right. Did I say it wrong? Oh, wait a minute. So Xander asks, if dicots have woody stems, all trees would be dicots, but that chart says dicots have a taproot system. Well, that's a good point, because I didn't think that, I think there is trees that don't have taproots. Is that what you're saying? That some trees don't have taproots? I'm not 100% sure about that. I know a lot of trees do have taproots, and but from my understanding, like I am pretty sure a lot of the pine trees have taproots. And I know I pulled a few trees that have taproots because they're really got this really long, deep root. I'll have to look that up to see whether that makes sense. Whether, let's see. Huh. Oh, you guys can't see that, can you? I guess I'm sharing this screen. I was trying to figure out how to get to my other screen. Let me look that up and see, because it does saying that dicots are taproot only, which would mean, I mean, the implication there is what you're saying is that all trees would have to have a taproot. And I don't know that that's true, but it didn't really say. Let me see if I can, if anybody, did anybody, because this chart was not from the book. Let's see. Okay, so let's not 100% go with that right now until I find out for sure that they all have a taproot, because I'm not sure about that, and I don't see that here in the book. That was a chart that I already had there. I will modify that, and I'll let you know if anybody else actually knows. Feel free to, let's see, tree with okay, well there you go. Let's see, what page is that on, Xander? That was back in roots, right? Was that back in the roots? Oh yeah, this tree has a fibrous root. Oh, right there. Okay, so that chart is wrong. That would not be because as far as I understand, all die cuts, all woody stems are die cuts. I mean, because right here, that's one of the kind of the differences is that they have pith and bassicum. So all die cuts are woody. Let me go back to woody stems. So that would be wrong about, as far as I know, about the tap roots. So just ignore that. It's not, doesn't say that in the book that I can find. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. That won't be on your test or quiz or anything like that. If I find out anything else, I'll email you guys. But again, make sure that you guys emailed by tonight the work from the that I sent out. I sent out that email to all the parent emails. Make sure they reply and saying whether you did the work or not.
I'm lagging super bad. Can you say that again
Yeah. So
about the email?
yeah, I think I did get all of yours, Joel. I got all your work. It was just the email.
Okay.
Yeah. The email I sent with I just want you guys to, from now on, we're only going to be having you guys send in quizzes or labs for grading. Everything else, just have your parents reply to the email saying whether you did the work. And I like I said, I'm pretty sure I got most of y'all's on here. I know I don't think I got everybody's, but you have until this evening to get that done. I will be the quiz. There will be this next week. I'll send out another email with what's due again for the next Thursday. And that will include the test for Module 14. If anybody doesn't have that solutions and test book and needs a copy of that test, please email me. And I can email a copy to your to the parent email. And then they may need the answer key. I can do that as well. I'd rather everybody have the solutions and test book. And if you can get your hands on a copy from somewhere, please do. So your parents can have that for these last few tests. I know this is kind of a pain, guys, but again, we're all learning through this together, and hopefully, I hope you guys are staying safe and not too stressed out about all these changes, but this will pass and things will go back to normal, and we'll be surprised how probably we'll just be wondering how it was so crazy for a while there. Anyway, thanks y'all for joining in, and we'll hope to see you guys next week. Oh, and again, if I change the time or whatever, I'll let you know. I may not be able to, but don't worry, just be paying attention to your emails. If you at least check them once a day, you should probably be fine. So take care and y'all be safe, okay?